Hello everyone, welcome back to yet another episode of Madlookz VFX podcast. And today is an awesome day because I'm interviewing Howard Cabalfin. Howard is the global Roto-Paint supervisor at Digital Domain. We will hear more about his work and career in this episode. So let's start. Hey Howard, welcome to the podcast.
Hi Manoj.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm great too. And I'm really excited to do this podcast with you. My first question is to the audience here, can you give us a casual intro about yourself?
Sure. As you mentioned, my current title is Global Roto-Paint Supervisor for Digital Domain. I've been in the industry about 16 years. I started off as an artist a long time ago. I've been lucky enough to get a lot of work over those years and gain a lot of experience, worked at different facilities. I worked at ILM, I worked at Framestore, and Method, and a bunch of smaller boutique shops around LA. I'm currently in LA now, and I feel like I have a little bit of information to offer you today, and I hope I can do a good job.
So, Roto-Paint is an important skill in the VFX industry, and I too work as a Roto-Paint artist. So, but I wonder many don't know much about Roto-Paint. Yeah, so can you tell what is this job role like Roto-Paint?
Great. Yes, you are correct. A lot of people don't know much about Roto-Paint outside of the VFX industry. And I would argue that there are still a lot of people within the industry who don't know a lot about Roto-Paint.
Got it.
So Roto, basically, if you were to define it in a simple way, is the creating of mats for a particular image. A mat is more like a specific area of the image. So Zoom is an excellent example of a mat. You can see here, even though I am talking to you from my bedroom, a mat is being created live to put me on a different background. So that's one of the purposes of creating a mat, is to extract a character and put them on a different background. Now, there are 3 other purposes for Roto, and I won't deep dive into those unless you want me to get into that. But this is the basic definition of Roto: is there's an artist who manually has to draw this edge, right, to do some kind of visual effects purpose.
So can you give a rough intro about what is paint role? Yes.
So paint is also a very important yet invisible skill and role in the visual effects industry. So one good example of that is you can see here, there's a character sitting in the back, right? If this were a movie and this was like a crew guy, right? The guy is just kind of just chilling back there. It's like, hey, this guy's not supposed to be in the shot, right? And it looks like there's also another dude back here, like with a black backpack, right? So it is our job to what's called remove, or you can paint this character out. Many people use the term paint to paint that character out. There are other techniques that are not necessarily paint, but they also will remove this character or these characters. And there are other things that can be removed, like markers. For example, if this was a green screen and you wanted to use tracking markers on the green screen to get the camera track, we would need to remove those markers in order for the tracking, for the compositors to be able to key and remove that blue screen.
Got it.
So it ranges from anything from as simple as a marker removal all the way up to full-on character removal. And it gets a lot more difficult as you go from simple markers all the way to, full characters.
Yeah. Thanks to Zoom, we have some live demonstration here because of Zoom.
Exactly. That's why I'm using this background, because I thought it'd be a great visual.
Got it. It was helpful. I'm curious about how this concept evolved and how we evolved to the softwares like Silhouette and Mocha Pro for rotoscoping, as well as the Paint. So I will appreciate it if you could share something about the history of how Roto-Paint evolved throughout these years.
Sure. So let me caveat that I'm not a visual effects historian. I don't quite know. I don't quite know where all the turning points happened.
Yeah.
But I do have some general knowledge. So from what I've read, back in 1915, a man named Max Fleischer had created the concept of rotoscoping. Max basically used this technique of drawing on a piece of glass and over multiple frames to recreate it's more like a realistic looking animation. So before that, there was Disney, and they had, everybody knew about animation. Like you can see Mickey Mouse, and they have the cartoons have this very kind of staccato kind of movement, right? It's like not very smooth, right? But in real life, they have more smoother movement, and Max's technology basically was used to recreate live action footage and make it look like animation.
Just tracing,
just by tracing things, right? So again, I don't know all the details of that, but that's the general gist that I got from the history that I read. And that led to movies like Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings. I don't know if you've seen that animation. Ralph Bakshi, very famous animator. He did a movie called Lord of the Rings before Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings a long time ago. And there's a scene that I saw in that movie that like blew my mind. It was like the ring wraiths, right? The bad guys. One of the bad guys in the movie were chasing the hobbits, and it was like, it looked like people on like hooded characters on horseback, and it looked very realistic. Like it didn't look like the rest of the animation. It almost felt like it was a different technology or a different feel. So that's a really good movie to watch, to see like how animation evolved from the Max Fleischer period into animation. And then at a certain point, and I did a post on this on my Instagram, where at a certain point, rotoscoping ended up in VFX. And the first known instance that I saw of rotoscoping that was the most obvious was the Star Wars lightsabers. So when George Lucas was shooting the lightsaber fight scenes, they were using these like glow sticks, like they're electric plastic sticks that had some kind of lighting inside of them. So they would fight using these sticks. And one reason why they wanted the sticks there was because the actors did not know, it didn't feel realistic when the contact was being made, right? So they needed physical sticks to actually hit each other so that the actors could feel, and the audience could feel the impact of things clashing together. Now, as you know, Star Wars is the lightsabers are glowing. And they have a very intense lighting inside the lightsaber. So the light that was being produced wasn't bright enough, and they didn't have colors, right? So each lightsaber has like a different color based on the person wielding it, or like I think some kind of gem that they used for the lightsaber. Anyway, everybody has a different color, and so they needed, one, to make the lighting more intense, and two, they needed to color the lightsaber itself. And so at some point, somebody came up with this idea like, hey, we can rotoscope the lightsaber stick, and then later on in compositing, they can make that matte glow brighter and with a different color. So that was another instance of where I saw in history where rotoscoping became it started transitioning into the VFX world, right?
Yeah.
And now with other things where, like in visual effects, there's something called set extension. So maybe you can see like on the floor, there's like a set, but then behind it, there's a blue screen, right? So sometimes those blue screens are not keyable. So that's where you would see stuff become rotoed because they needed to separate the foreground from the background.
Yeah.
Again, I'm diverting a little bit to like the purposes of roto, but as you watch more visual effects, right? The reason why I brought that up is as you saw more movies like Jurassic Park, right? You would need to have the dinosaurs behind the live action characters, and if they weren't shot on a blue screen, the dinosaur would be in front of the character, right? So instead of behind. If my hand were like a dinosaur, right? If they put the dinosaur and it's supposed to bite my neck or something, it has to be behind me. But if there's no mat, you need that.
Great.
And then obviously it just kept evolving. Roto just kept like more as VFX got more and more complicated, and as directors and visual effects supervisors wanted more integration with the CG and the live action, rotoscope became even more important. And I would argue that in the advent of faster production schedules, where people aren't shooting proper blue screens, the more dirty or the more cluttered that blue screen is, the more roto you're going to need for that shot.
Of course. So
that anyway, I that's what I'm noticing from a historical point of view as my career progresses from 15 years ago to today. I've noticed that blue screens are becoming less and less clean. There's less and less time being spent on the set to create the purest possible blue screen. And certain shots are just really ambitious. Like for Flags of Our Fathers, one of the first visual effects projects that we had, they were shooting like really, really wide landscape shots, and there was like whole beaches, right, like with hundreds of characters, and they could put a blue screen in a section, right, but there's no blue screen, there's not enough blue screen material to cover like 3 miles of landscape, right? So you have to roto anything that doesn't fall on that.
That will be a tough job.
Like it would just be logistically impossible to do that.
So I'm wondering, like, at which point paint started getting evolved or as a job role?
That's a question I'm less qualified to answer, I believe. When I first started, I didn't know much about paint, and there's people like who've been in the business even longer than I have, and they started in paint and they still do paint. So I would probably ask one of those people, what is the history of paint? But again, I could talk about my career over the last 15 years. Is when we first started off, things were kind of simple. You were able to kind of just paint markers and wires, right? But as my career progressed, I saw paint getting much more
complex.
Much more complex, right? So it felt like the things that the compositors were doing for cleanup were being pushed down into the paint roll. So, for example, it wasn't simple marker or wire removals anymore. It was like for example, let's say I have this phone, right? I'm talking into this phone, and the director says, "I don't like the size of that phone. It's too big." Right? So I was like, I want there to be like a mini phone, like something that looks like the size of a pencil, right? I want there to just be a mini phone like this. So you go from a phone this size to a phone this size, and it's like, well, what am I going to do for all that content that is missing, right? Like, you're going to have to reconstruct my face.
Yes. Yes.
Right? Like, if you don't have a clean plate for this, like, how am I going to reconstruct that face? And what if I'm talking, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm talking, now you also have to reanimate my mouth movement. So that's a very extreme case, but it does happen.
Yeah.
So this is something that the paint team, like, 20 years ago never had to deal with. But as I feel like as schedules are getting more demanding, as budgets getting less and less, I feel like the economics has kind of pushed those really high skilled, high complexity tasks to the paint team. Yeah. And now the paint team has to elevate their skills, right? To kind of meet the challenge. And that's where I'm kind of at right now, is I'm trying to always be mindful of the demands that are coming to to my team, and I'm trying to protect them, because there's a deficit between the request and the skill sometimes, right? Like, you might not have an artist who can do like a full mouth animation, or for a full face reconstruction, right?
Yeah.
And maybe it's my job to say no to that particular task. Maybe we need to just say, let's just make this a full CG face, right?
Yeah. Much easier.
And that's where a full CG face may be more easier. Or, like, maybe we can keep the eyes, right? If the shot looks like this, maybe we can keep the eyes and just do the lower mouth, right?
Great.
So that's a lot of my discussions at work is, like, when they ask for a request like that, we have to gauge, like, what's the most effective, the cost efficient and time efficient solution to that. Maybe it's not a paint task. Maybe it's a CG task. Let's say you decide to do this paint like 100%, like, say there's 100 shots, right, where you have to remove this phone. I would agree with you that a full CG might be more cost effective over those, and the quality level would probably be more convincing.
Different.
So oftentimes, and like on WandaVision, we worked on vision, right? And vision face is like, much of it is CG. But what we did was we rotoed the eyes, the nose, and the mouth, right? So those eyes, the nose, and the mouth, those things, if they come from the plate, they're the most realistic looking.
Correct.
And if you put CG around it, as long as you have the real life elements, it will look more convincing than full CG eyes, full CG nose, full CG mouth. Because CG has yet to, and it's changing, but CG is still looks a little not as lifelike as real life, right? Obviously. Now with our developments in machine learning and animation and machine learning animation, you're seeing more realistic CG, like Thanos. We're very proud of our work on Thanos. But CG is not always the best solution in every case.
Great.
So that's where Roto and 2D solutions are important.
Got it. I already mentioned the name of some softwares, and there are many such softwares in the industry. But I would like to know, which is your favorite preference for Roto and Paint?
Okay, that's a very controversial question.
Of course, yes.
I've learned that that question has will spark a lot of discussion and argument and things like that. And I feel that none of the arguments are wrong. I think everyone has a very valid case for every software. So I'm going to try to answer this question in layers, right? So the first layer we need to talk about are what are the options, right, for Roto and Paint. So if you look at the main ones, there's Silhouette, which is the market leader, right, for Roto and Paint.
Yeah.
There's Nuke, Foundry Nuke. There is Adobe After Effects, and there's Flame.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's many smaller options out there. I'm not going to mention them just yet, but those are the main ones. Would you agree?
Yes, of course. And I would add Mocha Pro, like some studios uses Mocha Pro also for rotoscoping.
Yes. Yeah, so I'm going to keep Mocha out of it because this is kind of separate. Like what I'm going to try to do is focus on the industry leaders, right? So the ones that the marketplace has adopted the most, right?
Sure.
So the short answer to this question is, how do you define best? Is it the artist defining the term best software, or is it the studio determining the best software? Because what I would argue is that the choice of the artist may not be compatible with the choice of the studio.
Of course, yeah.
So say you're a flame artist, right? And you give Roto, and here's the other thing too. So the big question here is, are you going to use the splines? Are you going to use the rendered mattes, or are you going to need both?
Yeah.
So that question right there should determine what is the primary software, right? Because my feeling, my philosophy is you should use the software that is best for the consumer. And primarily in our world, the Roto artist consumer is the compositor.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Roto doesn't operate by themselves, right? They don't just get a plate and just say, hey, Roto, whatever you want. That's never the case, right? Like in this case, right? If it was me and you don't tell me what to Roto manage, I'd be like rotoing the tree, I'd be rotoing that guy, I'd be rotoing all the leaves, I'd be rotoing the ground, I'd be rotoing the water, I'd be rotoing this foreground leaf, I'd be rotoing this foreground leaf, I'd be rotoing this branch. It's endless, right? So this is why teamwork is very important, right? So you need to talk with the compositor and ask, what do you need rotoed, right? So after you establish that relationship with the consumer, you need to ask that compositor, what is the preferred software that they need? Because are you going to use the splines? Does the compositor use the spline, right? So if he's going to use the spline and he just wants the spline, then, and he's working in After Effects, I'm not going to give him a Nuke spline.
Obviously, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And vice versa, if he's working in Nuke, I'm not going to give him an After Effects spline.
Got it.
So you have, in my world, right, as a supervisor, the artist isn't what I care about, it's the consumer. I shouldn't say that. I care about the artists and their preferences, but I have to favor the compositor's requirements.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, of course.
So the first question that needs to be answered before you can answer what's the best question is, what does the consumer need? Do they need splines? Do they need mattes? Or do they need both splines and mattes?
Yeah.
To me, I think Boris Silhouette Effects is the best, from an artist point of view, it's the best Roto software because it has very specialized tools for Roto. Yeah. Now, from a supervisor point of view, I do not like to deliver Boris Silhouette splines by themselves. You can't just export it to the comper and expect them to know what to do with it, right?
Yes, yeah.
So in our studio, we've created what's called a technical specification. And it's basically we want the splines, we want the renders, and we want the splines and we want the renders, right? And we want it all in Nuke.
Got it.
So we know that. So this is where we have to kind of give and take, right? So we know that a lot of the market knows silhouette, and the skill set of our people in across the world are very silhouette based. However, the compositors don't want a silhouette script, right? You can't give them a silhouette script, so you have to export it out.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, we want the scripts to be published into our pipeline. So we have a template that all the artists, no matter where they use Silhouette or Nuke, they have to import that into the template and then render it all out in the Nuke template. And it's very specific to our studio. So I can't really get into the proprietary nature of that.
No problem.
But it goes back to what I was talking about, is the studio should dictate what is the format that they want the roto. In our case, is splines and mats. And those splines and those mats have to be Nuke splines and Nuke renders, Nuke mats.
Got it.
So again, it's a very tricky question that you're asking. It's because for the artist, I totally support using Silhouette, because it's an amazing program and it does so many things that Nuke does not. But that's good for the artist, but that's not good for the compositor. Right?
Got it. Yeah, of course.
Now, if the compositor is okay with just rendered mats, right? Like, oh, you can make it in anything. You could make it in Adobe Photoshop, right? Because there's no splines involved. But from what I learned, that compositors sometimes like to tweak the splines, right? They want you, like maybe on one frame, they'll say, oh, this edge is just a little bit too, like 1 pixel too far, right? So let me just push that back in and then re-render it, right? Or I'll just have it live in my Nuke script. If you don't provide that spline in a way that's familiar to the compositor, they're going to get frustrated.
Yes.
Right? Would you agree?
Yes. Of course.
So like, imagine if I gave a new compositor an After Effects script, right? They're going to be like, what is this? I can't work with it, right?
Yes.
So I guess the short answer then is, if you're a roto artist, you should learn all the software. You should learn all 4, right? But if you don't have time to learn all 4, then at least learn 2. Learn Silhouette and learn Nuke. Yeah.
That's the best answer.
That's, to me, that covers an artist's skill set for most of the jobs in VFX, right? Yeah. Now there's one more answer that I wanted to add.
Yeah, please.
Silhouette is, again, amazing program, but it's very much geared to Roto-Paint, right? So if you want to be a compositor, you are not getting the exposure you need or the experience you need to work in Nuke, which is the industry leading software. Right? So for many Roto-Paint artists who aspire to become compositors, you should be learning Nuke, and try to do everything you can in Nuke, because the more you understand how the software works, you understand how the mindset of a compositor works, and you understand the broader discipline of compositing. You're not just going to be focused on Roto-Paint. You'll have Roto-Paint as your foundation, and then as you become growing as a compositor, your mind will start to make connections, right? Oh, this is why I was doing all that Roto. This is why I was doing all that paint, right? Because now it starts to expand, and you doing Roto and Paint in Nuke allows people to composite much easier, right? You make that transition easier. If you're only doing Silhouette and you're you're doing Silhouette 24 hours a day, when you try to make that transition to a compositor, it's gonna be hard, because you don't know that software. It's node based. Well, Silhouette's node based now too, but
it's quite different.
There's different nodes, different operations, right? In Nuke that are different than in Silhouette. And then the other thing is, and I'm sorry my answer is so long, but I have a lot to say.
No problem. I would love to hear. Yeah.
The other thing is Nuke also has a 3D camera system, a 3D projection system, right?
Yeah.
And there are shots, even roto shots, where I need the 3D camera to track the shape in 3D, because it's not tracking in 2D. No matter what you use, no matter if you use 2D, you use Silhouette's planar tracker, Mocha, like you can never actually mimic the 3D movement of an object in 3D, right?
Yeah.
You need a 3D tracking system, a 3D camera system. And so Silhouette does not have that feature, at least not that I know of, right?
No,
Maybe they're working on it, but they don't have that feature. So, so Silhouette, I mean, is missing that tool set to do 3D. And this becomes even more important when you're doing paint. Like, for example, like say you're going to remove this bar right here, right? And say the camera is moving like this, right? So that's a 3D camera move, right? Because you're moving in Z space.
Yeah.
So the parallax of the floor is going to be different if you're going to track it in 2D versus in 3D.
Of course, yeah.
And I didn't learn this until I saw Frank Reuter. Frank Reuter is a guy, he's a very smart visual effects artist, and he knows the artistry as well as the technical side. He has this YouTube video that shows like how to remove a dolly rig, like a camera track, right? It's on the floor, and it's the exact same move. It's like moving like this, right? Moving towards like the scene.
The green screen shot, right?
It's yeah, I think it's a green screen shot, but it's mostly shot in a set.
Yeah, I remember.
Like you probably saw that. So the way he did it in 3D was brilliant, because he did like an unwrap technique, right? And then reprojected it. And the quality of the quality and speed of that technique in 3D was much like, I would say, a fraction of the speed and a fraction of the quality if I were to do that in 2D.
Of course, yeah.
So this is why I'm like, Roto-Paint, even though it's considered like a very like low level discipline, right? I think in today's world, like it's become its own, like it deserves its own respect as its own, like it's its own discipline in VFX. And because we're using techniques like that, like 3D projection, that 10 years ago we never had to do, right? 15 years ago we never had to do that.
Got it. I thought the answer will be simple, but there are a lot of insights and there are a lot of perspective which we should look into while choosing a software. Yeah.
So the shortest answer is learn everything, right? And master everything.
Yeah.
But if you don't have the time, then pick. I think Nuke and Silhouette are the best bets. And for me, being in my studio, if you can learn Nuke, you're pretty much 80% of the way there. Silhouette will get you the other 20%.
Everyone has their own story for their successful career. Through this podcast series, I'm getting to know many such motivational stories. Can you share some inspirational moments in your career, like when you started and how were early days in your career, and also how you traveled throughout these years?
All right.
Long story.
So, so my first job that I ever got was doing a roto job for my friend's short film. So I had a friend who worked at ILM, and he was transitioning out of visual effects and trying to become a director. So he was shooting some short films, and he said, hey, you want to learn visual effects? Because I was in graphic design at the time. And he goes, like, your skills with Adobe, all the Adobe products can translate to visual effects. And he goes, well, I'm not going to pay you, but you can use all my footage to put on your demo reel.
Okay.
And so that's what I did. I spent like 3 months doing roto for him on his short film. Shout out to Marcus Stokes, one of my good friends, and he's now a director in TV and movies. And anyway, he gave me my first break, and even though I didn't get paid, I was enjoying myself. I enjoyed what I did, and I spent a lot of sleepless nights doing this roto for him. I submitted that footage as my demo reel with all the breakdowns. And when I look back at it now, I was like, oh man, that roto was terrible. I was like, woo, that would not fly. But I think somebody, saw it, and a year later, I had to wait a year because I think I submitted it to one SIGGRAPH, and I didn't get a job interview until a year later. And I basically got an interview, and they didn't hire me on the spot. They had to test me still because they wanted to see if I could do Roto and Nuke. And so they tested me, and I was able to do it. And they hired me, or they gave me an offer. Now, I was working at another job at the time. I was working for Warner Brothers, and I in a very small data management role. And they were going to offer me a full-time job. So I had basically two job offers at the same time. So I had this one job, which is they're going to give me a full-time job with benefits and everything like that. And then on this side, they had a visual effects studio who was going to offer me a roto job that was only going to last for 3 months and no benefits, right? And so you had this choice to make, right, between this full-time job with all these benefits and this kind of short-term job with no benefits. And to make things worse, I had a baby on the way.
Oh, okay.
So I was really stressed out. And so all of these things were really stressful decisions to make. And I ultimately had to say, well, what choice would give me the most progress over a long term of time, right? And thankfully, my wife was very supportive of, the process. She said, I trust your instincts. And so I chose the 3-month job, right? There's no guarantee of even work after the 3 months. And so I took that 3-month job, and now it's 15 years later. So after I made the leap, though, I still had to prove myself on the job. So thankfully, I had a lot of mentors. So that's a piece of advice I would give to many of your artists is, number one, find a mentor who's really supportive of you. There are a lot of people in Roto-Paint who are very kind and gracious with their knowledge. And I'm very lucky to have a lot of people in my life who really helped me get to where I am, right? I didn't do it by myself. I had a lot of people fellow artists and leads too, who and supervisors who whenever I got stuck, they would help me get through it with different techniques or mindsets, right? And then the other thing that I think has helped me make my transition from being a junior artist all the way to where I am now is be constantly curious. I think you mentioned in one of your posts or one of your comments with me is you should recognize that there are developments in software and technology happening every day, right? So if you're an artist who pays attention and is curious as to what are those new techniques, what are those new technologies, how can I add that to my skill set, right? I was not only lucky enough to have mentors who supported me, but I also had parents who were very curious. They wanted me to always ask questions and don't just think you know the answer, right? Be humble and always try to add more to your skills by learning from people who are supportive of you, and even people who aren't supportive of you. They people who have a difference of opinion. Maybe there's opinions about techniques that you don't necessarily agree with. there's little bits of information that they're offering you. It's just maybe the way that they're communicating isn't appealing to you. So those qualities those two things that I had at the beginning of my career, I still use today. I still ask questions. I still want to learn more, and I still surround myself with people that are supportive of our process, right?
Got it.
So that's how I navigated my career, and those are philosophies that I have that still benefit me today.
Yeah, like have you heard about Rotobot and Runway ML? I mean, Runway is a website and Rotobot is a plugin. And all those automotive roto tools, and I saw some technical papers also in SIGGRAPH for automation in Paint. So according to you, how is going to be the future for Roto-Paint? After all these AI and machine learning developments in the visual effects industry?
Excellent question. I don't know as much about Runway or Rotobot and as I should. There's I've used them both on my own personal time. The results that I've been getting have not been great, and so when the initial tests are not successful, it kind of makes you less incentive. You have less excitement to continue studying it, right? It's like, well, this isn't giving me what I want, right? So I kind of gave up. Now, Nuke has a version of this machine learning that is in Nuke 13 called Copycat. And we are extensively using it because Nuke is available at the studio. So we have more opportunity and more, the tool is more available to us than Runway or Rotobot. So we've been, not just myself, but a bunch of really smart compositors who are interested in machine learning have also been using this tool called Copycat. And again, you're getting pretty good results. My feeling right now is it is the future, right? Machine learning is the future. We need to be more exposed to it, no matter how much you might be resistant to this idea. And no matter how much, even I'm resistant to the idea because when you draw a spline, that spline is there. Yeah. It's always going to be there through the entire frame range. With machine learning, like you can see, like, for example, here, like if you look at my headphone, right? Like I'm pointing at it now, like sometimes the roto's there, sometimes it's not, right? Like as I move it, like if this was a roto, this would not go away. This would not disappear, right? Yeah. So that's the problem with machine learning is that it's called what I call temporal consistency. I would love to see temporal consistency. So when you see the map for it, like if on one frame the machine detects the edge, why can't it stay on the whole time, right? Yeah. It's like the machine recognizes this as an edge, right? So why does it go in and out? So now that's the challenge of machine learning right now. But as I'm starting to see the new tests that are being done recently, I see like it's getting better. Like machine learning is starting to recognize these edges, right? And maintaining the temporal consistency. Wow. So I have a feeling that right now it's not great, but in a year, maybe 2 years, it's going to be really good. So no matter what, we should learn these techniques from all levels, right? Like from visual effects supervisor down to roto artists, right? We should all even PAs, right? Like anybody in visual effects should learn about machine learning because it's not just roto. This machine learning is going to affect every part of visual effects. Yeah. Now, I don't know what kind of impact it's going to have, what degree, but I have a feeling it's going to impact us all. So we should all learn about this. Yeah. Now the second part of that is machine learning still doesn't do splines, right? Yeah. Machine learning only does the map. And again, if you're a studio that wants the mattes and the splines, machine learning can get you the matte, but it will not get you the spline.
Yes.
So what are we going to do with that? Like, are we going to just ignore splines from now on? Like, you're just going to go 100% machine learning and not have any splines whatsoever? I think compositors would be angry, right? They'd say, no, we still need our splines, right?
Yeah.
And then for paint, you need, what do you call it? It's also being used, well, paint, it's a little less, it's more forgiving, right? Like, if you want to use machine learning for markers, for example, you could really get, I think that'd be a great example of, if you want markers done, you do use machine learning on 6 or 7 frames, and then have machine learning just interpolate all the rest, right? And then if all the shots are the same angle, you could literally just plug in the plate and do like 100 plates at a time, theoretically, right?
Yeah.
That's the theory. I don't know if there will be a future when we actually are able to do paint on a large scale like that.
I think machine learning is gonna be impactful for every industry. If we want to survive in the industry, or if you want to survive in this job, we need to stay updated. Probably everyone needs to learn programming in the future.
I'm not going to argue with that. I think programming it almost feels like learning English, right?
Yeah.
It's like, if you want to operate in society, people should have a basic knowledge of English, right?
Yeah. Yes.
I assume, you learned English, in school, right? And were you from India?
Yeah, I'm from India.
Yeah, so you learn your native language as well as English, right? Because that's they're preparing you for being part of a global society, right?
Yeah.
And at this moment, English is the universal global language, right? I feel like programming may be also needed to be considered as like English, skill, right? Because computers are everywhere.
Yeah. Now we have human robots.
In your pocket.
Yeah. Yeah.
What were you saying about robots?
No, I was telling like, okay, now we have human robots as well. So if we need to speak with them, then probably we need to have the skill of programming in future. That's a great.
Yeah, I think it's an amazing, we're living in a very, like technology like when I was younger, technology, the amount of technology that we had is not as much as it is today. Yeah. And so it's, and underneath all of that is programming, right?
Like it's relevant to the topic which we discuss now. So how you are able to stay focused, or how you are able to stay updated in this ever-changing era of life we are living in. So I just want to know what all are the habits you follow for that.
So I definitely am not updating as I should. I feel like I definitely need to update more. I have a lot of responsibilities at work because I'm in charge of 3 different studios.
Yeah.
And also, like, I'm also overseeing a lot of the vendors that are outside of our studio. So maintaining a level of consistency of quality and performance across all of that has been very challenging. So a lot of my, I guess to answer your question, the way I update my skills is, number one is I listen to my people, right? Because they are also informing me of like new developments. So I pay attention, and so if any of my artists say, "Hey, I learned this new technique," and I'm like, "Oh, well, show me," right? And if they're doing techniques that are cutting edge, then I will definitely ask them to demo it for the larger group. So this is part of my role as a supervisor, is that I have the opportunity to hear new developments in technology and in technique. So part of my job is not only to absorb and learn that myself, but also to share that information with the larger group, because not everyone's going to have the same exposure to these new techniques and new technologies, right? So I'm trying to always push my people to learn these new things and expose them to that.
Yeah.
Now it's up to them to do their own study, obviously, because everybody, like, skill is personal, right? Like if you want to stay updated, that means you have to study yourself. The other side of the story is when I learn something new, I have to practice it too. It's not enough to see a tutorial, right? Your muscles have to react. Yeah. Like you have to react to be able to do it in when you're getting given that task, right? So many artists, including myself, we get stuck just practicing the techniques that we're comfortable with, right? And when sometimes we won't practice a new technique unless we're forced to learn a new technique. Yeah. Like, for example, like 3D projection in Nuke, right? I never had to learn that. But when I was given like these 3D camera shots, I was like, man, these 2D techniques are failing, right? And I learned very quickly that from other people, like, oh, you can project that, right? You can project that roto, you can project that paint. And I was like, what's that? You know? And so I had to pass like on the shots that were giving. So I had to tell my lead I couldn't do that shot. And they gave it to another artist. But afterwards I was mad. So after work, I learned how to, I practiced doing a tutorial, and I kept practicing it until like I could do it without looking at the tutorial. Yeah. Right. So part of updating your skills is not only, number one, you have to recognize you need a new skill, right? But two is you have to practice it to the point where you can do it from muscle memory. Yeah. So often, like, I don't know if do you play music, Manoj?
No, I am not. I mean, my passion is about video making and all these tutorials and all.
Okay. So I love the ukulele, right? So I wanted to learn the ukulele. And what I did was I watched a lot of videos, right? So, but just because I can watch the video and can like do one chord does not mean I can make a song. Does that make sense?
Of course, yeah.
Like, so people who say that they study a video and say, oh, I can do that because I watched the video, that's not the case, right? You have to be able to like perform that task. So it's not enough to watch the video and maybe do one chord. You got to be able to do the full song. Yeah. if you want to do something like what we do. So a lot of artists, I think it's very easy to like say, oh, I saw that video. They say I'm familiar with that technique, right? But being familiar with the technique and actually doing the technique is two different things. So yeah. I feel like people need to update their skills every day. And again, it goes back to being curious. Like, what skills am I lacking is one question you should ask. Everyone should ask themselves, what am I lacking? What tasks can I not do because I don't have the skills? And then once you identify those tasks, then you learn whatever you can. You study the videos. There's a lot of free videos out there. You provide a lot of really good content to learn about how to do these techniques. Steve Wright, one of my personal mentors, has a lot of videos, free videos. Frank Reuter. There's a lot of great people who make really good content. So learn those techniques and then practice them so that when you actually do them, you're not slow, right? You're not like making mistakes that, you know, like there's a lot of people who learn by trial and error, but when the schedule is so tight, you don't have time for trial and error. You have to be able to work out all your techniques before you get the assignment. So those are the ways that I practice my techniques. And again, I should be practicing more. because I'm a supervisor, I'm more doing a lot more supervisory stuff. So I'm not doing as much artist stuff.
Yeah.
But that's no excuse. I should still push to spend maybe like half an hour, an hour every day to expand my skill set.
Yeah. And I agree to the point, like even I face this thing. I have seen many tutorials and I'm constantly watching new tutorials. But as I'm not practicing it, or as I'm not feeding that to my brain by practicing or by implementing that in my work, I'm just forgetting that technique or whatever it is. And but the thing which I remember is like I have seen a tutorial and again I need to go back and check that tutorial for implementing that technique into my work. So this is a serious problem. And if we want to come out of this problem, we need to implement that in our work, or we need to practice that technique in any shot, so that we can feed that technique into our brain. And anytime when we are in need of that technique, it will come out of the brain straight away without that video.
Yep. Well, again, I think like visual effects is like music, right? when you're a musician and you're on the stage, nobody's gonna pay attention to all your practice. They just want to hear really good, consistent music, right? And the audience will know when you make a mistake. So practice before. Like, to me, like working in an actual shot by a studio, like on a job, you're now, it's like you're a musician and you're being paid to play in a concert.
Great. Yeah. Let's suppose I'm a fresher and I'm coming straight away from the institute. So after this podcast, if I'm going to learn Roto-Paint and or if I'm choosing Roto-Paint as a career, what are the advices you are going to give me?
So yeah, for freshers who have no professional experience yet, but they might have technical training from an academic institution.
Yes.
I would recommend, number one, have curiosity and humility, right? So one of the things that I've seen that inhibit an artist's progress, and a lot of freshers too, is they think there's some that really know a lot. They think I did compositing in my school, so why do I need to learn Roto, right?
Yeah.
So that attitude kind of blocks progress. And that attitude also affects senior people too. So this advice goes for not only freshers, but senior people. But the advice is to always be curious, right?
Yeah.
No matter what skills you have, you can always learn what somebody else is doing, and add to your skills. Number two is be consumer focused, right? So especially in Roto, we have this task that is we call the occlusion Roto, right? So let's say you see this tree behind me. Let's say this tree does not exist. Let's say that visual effects supervisor wants to put a CG tree here. Like maybe they want a giant CG tree here, right? Or they want the tree. They see how it's cut. Maybe they want the tree to go all the way across, right? So they're going to put a CG tree to cover this whole path right here, right?
Okay.
So occlusion Roto means that you have to Roto me, right? Because I'm in front of the tree. So part of learning about being consumer focused is know what the compositor needs. So for example, if you're going to put a CG tree here, right? You can Roto me from here, like from here all the way across, right? Like you don't need to Roto my shoulder because the CG tree is going to start right about here.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So if you start rotoing my shoulder, that's fine. You can provide that, but you've kind of wasted time now rotoing this section, right?
Yeah.
When you can completely just focus on the screen right of my hand, right? All this.
Yeah.
So that's something they don't teach you in school. right? They don't teach you like, as a roto artist, you're part of this larger team. So if you know what the needs of the compositor are, or if you know where the VFX supervisor is going, how they're going to construct the shot, then you understand what roto you need to provide for the compositor, and you spend less time wasting on things that aren't going to be used at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So imagine if my hand was doing this, right? Like, imagine if I'm waving. Like, if the roto artist started rotoing my hand, this is a lot of roto, right?
Yeah.
And then in the end, you don't use it. Right?
Simply waste of time. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's part of it. It's like many roto artists, they get really focused on their job and they don't look at what's going on in the rest of the shot. So that is a very important skill to have as a roto and a paint artist. So one way to do that is when a lead or a production person gives you a task, ask questions about the task. Maybe ask them, what is the visual effect of the shot? Can I get more context? That's a very good question to ask anybody in visual effects is, can I please get more context? So again, it all ties back to being curious. If you're a fresher, you're not going to know a lot, but that's okay because everybody knows you're a fresher, right? You can't hide that, right? So there's no shame in where you are in your career if you don't know a lot because you just came out of school. But to me, where you should be ashamed is if you don't ask questions, right? If you just make a lot of assumptions. That's a lot of waste of the lead's time. That's a lot of waste for the production's time. If you just start doing things because you think you know it, and then you've wasted the time and the bids get blown out of, proportion. So always ask for more context. Try to understand from a deeper level, why is the roto important to this shot? Or why is the paint important to this shot?
Got it.
And the last thing is like, and I alluded to this, but I'm going to say this very explicitly, is have a great attitude when you come to work. People like to work with people who are excited about work, who are supportive of each other. They make the work life easy because they're bringing a really positive attitude. And I'm not saying that you should always be happy every day, right? That's not humanly possible, right?
Of course, yeah.
Especially where there's a lot of problems in the world, right? There's a lot of there's a pandemic, there's economics, anxiety, there's all these things. But for when you come to work, realize that you're working with a team and try to bring some light and joy to that team. Even if you're feeling down, just try to do the best you can to bring a little positive light. And hopefully that'll bring some positivity to yourself as well.
Yeah. I have seen several polls and posts about leadership and also about artistry for a Roto-Paint role in your LinkedIn and Instagram profiles as well. So I always feels very interesting to read and respond there. And I do that every time. So according to you, what are the good qualities needed for a lead or supervisor or in a Roto-Paint job role?
Ooh.
Interesting.
You're hitting me with some good questions, Manoush. The qualities I think are important for a lead are, number one, we talked about earlier. It's just like with an artist. Have a good attitude, number one, right? I call that being a good collaborator. I kind of, because attitude and collaboration kind of are connected, right? So if you have a great attitude at work, people want to work with you, right? And once you've established that human connection of like, oh man, this is somebody, this is a person I want to work hard for because he always makes me feel, or he or she makes me really feel good when I'm at work, right? He's, they're very generous with their time. They give me tutorials when I need them, and even if they don't have time, because leads can also be very busy, is that they're trying to encourage people to be their best selves, right? Even if they're just smiling and, having small human conversations and human connections with their team, right?
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's a really important quality to have.
Mm-hmm.
I am very lucky in my studio. Like all the leads that I supervise are amazing. They are some of the best collaborators that I've worked with. They always bring a positive attitude to work. A special shout out goes to my fellow supervisor in India, Didi Hyderabad, is Dheeraj Brahma. He's also a guy I would recommend you talk to. He's an amazing supervisor and does like he supervises a whole 100+ workforce there, and he's always bringing a positive energy to work. And he's really technically smart. So that's the other side of this story, is if you're a lead, try to be as technically smart as you possibly can. And here's the other side of that. I don't expect every leader to be like encyclopedias of knowledge or like, you might not know the answer. You might not know what's technically correct for any given shot, but at least listen to what are the options, right? So we talked about software, right? Before we even talked about what the best software was, we identified what the software was, right? We identified there's 4 softwares. Many people, they just want to jump to the choice, right? They just say, oh, just pick Silhouette, right? That's the one you should learn, right? And then they ignore the other 3 options, right? So always like identify what are the options before you make the choice, right? As a leader, I care as much about the decisions that you make, being a good decision maker, but I also care that you took the time to explore the options, right? Yeah. You have to know what the choices are for any given question. And I know there's a lot of pressure in our industry to like make decisions quickly. I want a decision right now. And sometimes maybe you can just say, hey, can I just take some time to explore what the options are, right? There's no shame in saying, can I get like 15 minutes, 20 minutes to just look at what are the options? Can I get some time to understand the context of the problem before I give you an answer, right? To me, that's really good leadership, is for people to take the time, take a breath, and say, okay, I'm going to look at this problem with a little more thought, and then I'll make a decision, instead of like always, if you know the answer and you're very confident with the answer right off the bat, I'm okay with that as well. But I want people to be to really understand, like as a leader, because you're in charge of a lot of people, your decisions will affect the budget, will affect the time, will affect the schedule, right? So I want leaders to, when they make a decision, it's a thoughtful decision, not that just something that I prefer, right? It's like, oh, we're going to do this because I said so, right? That's not, to me, that's not a good leader. What I want is a leader says, I'm going to make a decision A because of these reasons. And we can discuss that if you want, but I feel like decision A has the best number of reasons to support us, right?
Yeah.
So good attitude, being a good decision maker, like somebody who takes the time to be thoughtful of the decision. And then the third part is, are you making decisions based on what's good for you, or are you just making decisions what's good for the group? Because there are many times when compositors will ask for stuff, or a supervisor will ask me of something like, hey, can you do this? And I go, okay, what is it for? And they say, okay, we need it for this. And they go, okay, well, do you really need Roto for that? Maybe we could do a CG solution, right? Like, yeah. Because if you choose to do Roto, this is going to be a 1 month solution, right? We're going to need to Roto this for like 1 month, right? And then at the end, it might not even be, useful in the end. And so I'll tell the supervisor whoever asked me the request, I'll say, okay, this is the ramifications of your choice. If you want this option, these are the things that we're going to need. And then here are the things that might not work out. Like maybe the quality isn't going to be as what you expect, right? Because it's going to be really hard or really time consuming, and it's still not going to produce the result that you want. And then maybe over here, there's a better solution that will provide the best quality for maybe the same amount of time, but maybe it'll still take a month. But it'll provide a better quality. And instead of multiple versions, like maybe option A, you'll need like 5 versions. You might have to go around and around with a comp, right? Until you decide, oh yeah, that's good, versus this solution, which will provide, maybe you only need to do two versions.
That's it. Yeah.
So a lot of that comes with experience. A leader needs to kind of see, like, if they choose this is what's going to happen. It's going to take this long, right? Or if they choose this option, it's going to take this long. So there's a lot of, and each case is different, case by case. But I like leaders, and I like to choose leaders who not only consider one person's benefit, but consider the team's benefit, like everybody's overall. But it's like they looked at the problem overall.
That's great. A lot of insights. So thanks a lot, Howard, for spending time with us in this podcast. And I feel so good to talk with you here. I hope you follow my YouTube channel and content over there. The channel name is obviously it is Madlookz VFX. I would like to know some suggestions or feedbacks from you for improving my content in Madlookz VFX.
Sure. Well, my question for you is, what does Madlookz mean? Like, why did you choose that word?
Yeah, I mean, my initial plan was to not do tutorials for visual effects. I was editing my videos. I mean, I have a serious passion of editing videos, and I didn't felt, okay, I'm going to make this as a brand or anything like that. So I thought I kept this name as a Madlookz VFX presentation for my editing video. So yeah, so talking about the title, I didn't keep this title intentionally. Even now, I don't know what is the meaning of that title.
Yeah, I think you've explained actually what my advice would be for Madlookz is, like, it sounds like you don't quite know what the focus of your content is, and that's okay. You know, like, that's the beauty of your own channel, right? You can kind of explore different topics that are of interest to you. Try to connect with a community that, you know, even if it's a small community, even if it's like 2 or 3 people, right? Like, if you have some passionate followers who like your content, then go with that, you know, and try to build upon that audience. I personally like the topics that you provide. And if you just think of me as an audience, just a fan, right? When I look at your channel, I really like the content, but I don't necessarily know the organization, right? So, and YouTube is a little bit difficult because you can't really organize stuff, but maybe you can create like a playlist in YouTube that like is just visual effects only, and then like have another playlist that's productivity only, and then maybe you have passion projects, and then just do that playlist. I think that would be helpful. Like, I haven't gone into your site, your YouTube site, too in depth, but again, I like the content, so I'm going to go watch your site because I want to learn the stuff that you know, make sure that I'm up to date with the knowledge that you have. But I think making it easier to navigate is one of the things that I would recommend. And then, you know, your brand, right? It's like, as much as you might not think it's a brand and it's just kind of like an experiment, it is kind of like a thesis, like a mission statement. Like, a brand is like, this is what I, Manoj, am going to do here. I'm going to just focus on this area. So much like my Instagram channel, I don't talk about anything else other than Roto, right? And so if you go to that site, you're not going to find pictures of my dog. You're not going to find pictures of food that I ate that day, you know?
Yeah.
So I have a very specific content on that channel, and it doesn't have a lot of followers and not a lot of subscribers, but I'm okay with that because I feel like this is more of an expression of what I like. You can tell from our interview that I have a lot of opinions, a lot of strong personal opinions about my career and about this industry. And I feel like I'm at a point in my career where I got to get it out. I need to express myself. And so this, a bit better Roto in Instagram is my way to just get that out, right? And in the future, I'm going to do paint too. But I have so much to say about Roto that I'm not quite done with getting all that out yet. So I'm going to just keep putting out content about Roto until like I get it all out. And then when I start doing paint, I'm gonna probably create a new channel called A Bit Better Paint, or A Bit Better Prep. I don't know. That's a little bit, you know, paint is such a universal term. It could be like painting a house, or you know, like it's very confusing. So I might have to think about a different brand, but you can see like I'm already thinking about paint because it deserves its own content, right? It deserves its own channel, but I don't want to mix the two together because I feel like those are two separate topics.
Yeah.
So, and with the beauty of the internet, you know, you can get free, you can always do free channels, right? Like you can create another channel if you want. That's maybe you like, you know, watching birds, right? So you should create don't put bird pictures in Madlookz, right? Just put it in another channel.
Yeah. I mean, I used to do such things in my early time when I used to do productivity kind of videos in YouTube. But once I found my niche, like I'm going to do tutorials, and initially it was tutorials for prep artists or roto artists or basic compositing skills and all these things. Then I was keen on making tutorials on that. And eventually I started making podcast kind of videos or interview kind of inspirational sessions for my channel. Now I'm completely concentrated on one specific thing, that is basic 2D compositing, which includes basic compositing as well as Roto and Paint. I mean, I forgot to mention, like I have playlists for Nuke, Silhouette, Mocha, specifically all these software differentiations. And I have created that. So, I mean, I appreciate if you check that and give me feedbacks later on that.
So one of the things I would like everybody to start thinking about is you are organizing a playlist based on software, and that's good. So keep that. But I also want you to think about what we do as a discipline, right? So if you do Roto, some of the techniques are universal, right? Like if you learn how to do Roto in Nuke, you should be able to do Roto in other software packages, right? So I want you to also focus on the discipline. Yeah. Like if you can have a playlist about the discipline of Roto,
that's a great one.
That would also be my, because I don't think there's anybody out there who's doing Roto specific, you know, like tutorials.
Yeah.
There's a guy, what's his name? There's a guy in India. He only does his videos in India, which look really good, but because I don't know Indian or I don't know Hindi, I think he's speaking in Hindi. Yeah, I think he's speaking in Hindi.
Okay.
He has a lot of great tutorials on Roto. And I wish he localized I wish he translated or subtitled his videos in English.
Yeah. I guess it's Pixel Spark Studios, I guess.
Yes, Pixel Spark. Yes.
Yeah, that's an interesting channel. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that guy. I think he has good content. But again, I don't know what he's saying because I don't understand Hindi.
Yeah.
I support everybody who's doing content with Roto and educating more people about Roto. What would also be cool is like time, you know, like understanding how much time Roto takes. I started a post called on LinkedIn called "Why Does Roto Need Time?" Right?
Yeah,
And
I've seen that.
I didn't get to complete it because I got distracted with another topic about like, skill and level and the definitions of skills and what's the definition of levels. I thought that was an exciting topic, much more exciting than the time topic. But I want to get back to Roto taking time, because a lot of people think Roto's just some magic button, right? Like Zoom, right? It's like, well, if Zoom can do this, right? If Zoom can do this without any Roto artist, then why does this Roto take 5 days, right? Yeah. Or why is this Roto going to take 1 month, right? And I think that's a big misconception about Roto, that I'm constantly trying to educate people. Like, Roto takes time. It's very labor intensive. And especially if you want good Roto, it takes time. And I know your budget may say, no, we don't have time, but Roto, no matter what, still needs time. It just doesn't magically happen like this Zoom call, right? And what you're going to get is like edges that look like this, right?
Yeah, looking forward for a discussion on that topic.
Yeah, well, stay tuned to my LinkedIn and my Instagram, because I'm going to be hitting that topic. I'm going to return back to that topic again.
Yeah, I will add the link of LinkedIn and Instagram in the description of this video so people can join over there.
Yes, please.
Sure. So awesome. It was my pleasure to talk with you here, and I appreciate the time. And yep, so anything you would like to add up?
No, I also would like to thank you for the time, Manoj. I appreciate the work that you're doing, and I hope I provided
lots of insights,
enough quality content for you.
Lots of insights, I would say. So thank you, Howard. Have a fantastic rest of the day there.
Great. Thanks, Manoj.